I'm Mel.
I'm Sara.
And I'm Beck. And this is We Are Woman.
Today we're turning the mic inward. We're interviewing Sara, the heart and voice behind much of this space. We feel it's so important to understand the faces and stories behind the podcast, the women who hold these conversations, ask the questions, and live the work. In this episode, we dive deep into Sara's journey, what shaped her path, what she's learning, and what being woman truly means to her. It's an invitation to see the human behind the microphone and the heart behind the vision of We Are Woman. About Sara, Meta NLP and integral leadership practitioner, FBR Breathwork facilitator, integral semantics facilitator. Sara de Klerk's path has been one of remembering, a returning to what is already here, beneath the noise, the striving, and the conditioning. She discovered a quiet intelligence in the body that knows how to come home. Through years of inquiry, breath, and somatic practice, Sara has learned that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about softening into who we already are. Before the adaptations, before the performance, before the layers that shape how we think, feel, and behave in ways that aren't truly aligned.
Sara's journey began in the international modelling industry at just 14 years, a world that demanded constant adaptability and performance. By 19, she was walking for shows for Chanel, DKNY, and Avant-Garde, and was featured in Vogue, Elle, and Glamour. On the outside, it looked like success, but on the inside, Sara felt depleted, disconnected, and unable to access her authentic self. The chronic stress, emotional suppression, and physical exhaustion became the catalyst for a deeper inquiry. What drives us? What protects us? And how do we lose ourselves? And how do we find our way back? That question has guided her ever since. Over the past 7 years, Sara has worked with individuals and groups exploring the profound intelligence of the body and nervous system, the bridge between our inner and outer worlds. She witnessed how the body can metabolize stress, integrate old stories, and reclaim the aliveness buried beneath the layers of conditioning.
For Sara, this is the essence of embodiment, meeting life through the body, listening deeply, allowing what has been held too tightly to soften into wisdom, inner knowing, and reciprocity. Today, she brings together her personal and professional experience to support others in returning to their own wholeness, creating spaces where breath meets stillness, compassion meets judgment, and love meets the places we've turned away from. Sara, it's so good to turn the mic inward and have a chat to you today. You entered the modelling world at 14. How did that environment shape the way you related to your body?
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited for this conversation. Well, when I was 14, I was really excited. I was really excited to be in the modeling industry. I didn't really know what it meant at that age, and I didn't really know what to expect. And so at that point, I had a really, really healthy relationship with my body. I felt very natural and attuned to myself and also in front of the camera. And I actually felt I became really aware of how my body would form or shape itself in front of the camera. So how could I make my body look strong but also elegant? And how could I show myself in such a way, my face and my body, I guess, because that's obviously the product in the modeling industry. And so I became, I think, really aware of my body in a really good way. Um, I think it was later on, like around the age of 21, that I started to develop almost this hyper awareness around my body image and the way it looked. And then it turned into, yeah, a hyper vigilance around that, if you will, or it's just too much focus on that. But at the age of 14, I was so young, I wasn't aware of that. And I really just enjoyed being in front of the camera. I enjoyed the whole process. For me, it was a very creative process. I enjoyed working with the different photographers in different countries and different people. It's a very interesting and exciting environment for me at the age of 14. And my parents very much encouraged me as well. So I had a very positive relationship to it overall. Yeah.
Hmm. And when you say from the age of 14, you seem to enter the modeling industry with pretty much a healthy view of the body, but by the time you were 21, that had changed. Were there unspoken rules about what your body should be, what it should look like, what it should do?
I think those rules were pretty spoken. Yeah, there were several measurements I needed to like my hips could be a certain size, my waist could be a certain size, my breast could be a certain size. There were certain sizes for everything, and that got measured, particularly when I was working more full time in London and then Paris. That got measured pretty much every day. Um, so I think that measuring every day, that turned into a hyper controlling thing for me. Like, even if I was on my period, for example, or one day I had the night before I had a pizza or something, or just something different to eat, that immediately showed itself in the measurements. And so I started to just become hyper aware of what I would eat and what I would not eat, depending on if I had certain castings or certain jobs the next day, or certain ways I needed to look for the agency. And so I think over time, somewhere between the age of 14 and 21, and it's more repetitive conditioning that happened. It wasn't a single event. You know how we speak to single event traumas, for example. It wasn't like that. It was just a slow, gradual process of conditioning into hypervigilance around what my body shape was and what sizes, to the like, and every little centimeter was being measured, right? So it was quite perfectionistic, and that's what it turned into for me. It became very perfectionistic. There was almost at some point no room for just little flaws, really, which is just natural, rather. But that in my mind there was no space for that anymore.
Yeah, you've said before that it wasn't as glamorous on the inside as it looked on the outside. And I wonder if that's where this comes in. What was happening internally while the world saw perfection?
Yeah, good question. I love that. Well, I think even on the outside, there's certain moments of glamorous. There's certain moments when you're in front of the camera, or you're on the catwalk, or you're seeing yourself on a poster on the street. Then those are the celebration moments, of course. So that feels very glamorous. Or even when we would go out for dinner with all the models, and we would all have champagne and things like that. That's very glamorous, right? So those are the fun parts of the industry, and I very much enjoyed that. And there's very beautiful sides to that industry, and I learned so much in the process of that as well. And then the other side of the industry is also just really hard work. I sometimes had 8 or 10 castings a day, and what that meant is that literally I would wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, and I would be on the metro in London, and traveling from one location to the other, to travel sometimes for over an hour, and then be see the client, or the potential client, for under than 2 minutes, because they had 200 other girls that were also standing in line for that same casting and for that same job. So that in and of itself was not so glamorous. It was hard work. And then there was just the internal piece for me that started to happen at some point. I think I always had a pretty healthy relationship to how to navigate my mind, in terms of I would just focus on myself, and I would focus on when I entered a casting, for example, which is you're basically constantly being interviewed. It's basically a constant job interview. That's essentially your job as a model. Like you're constantly selling yourself. That's pretty much what it comes down to. And so I became good at that, and I became good at showing up in the moments when I needed to. And those were kind of like the peak moments. But in between, there was a lot of waiting and a lot of unknowing as well. Like I could sometimes have a week of castings and no job at all, and that is quite normal actually. And so that is not so glamorous. But then also, where I wanted to go with it is, I could focus on myself really well, but at some point it started to become, because I started to become more successful. So when I started walking shows for Chanel and DKNY, and I became more successful, the pressures became higher as well, or at least in my perspective or experience of it, there were higher demands placed on me, and also I expected more from myself. And I think I think that was the turning point where I started to expect more from myself. And that's why I started to also put a lot of pressure on myself. And I believe that it has come from, first it was external pressure, but it became internal pressure. So I just had high levels of perfectionism and control around how I should look and how I should show up and so on, in order to get the job, or in order to get to get chosen. And I noticed that with the other girls in the beginning, it could all be really friendly and so on, and it most of the time also was. But then at the end of the day, you are also competing. And so I noticed just subtle thoughts in my mind, just naturally, just starting to become more competitive. And I didn't like that. I felt it was not true for myself, and not true of how I actually view myself and other women. And I think it has distorted my perception and my relationship to the feminine within myself, but also to just women in general. And how funny that we're now on a podcast called We Are Women, right? Because I feel a big part of that for me is me actually reclaiming the relationship to my own feminine, but then also to other women, and really starting to come more into that sisterhood again, and being a bit less competitive, and more loving towards both myself and other women.
I love that. I feel from what you've just shared also, that environment really brought out having to engage in comparison, comparing yourself to other women. And I know that we can all do that, whether we've been in the modeling industry or not. So that competitiveness and comparing yourself to others, to other females, must have been, something that really played out for you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, comparison, competitiveness, perfectionism, and control, like those were pretty much the lenses that I really started to look through, which didn't actually feel natural. It didn't feel like what you guys said before. It didn't feel authentic to me. I never used to have that sort of a way of looking at things. So that's when I just really started to notice my thoughts change, alongside just a hyper focus on my physique and how that would look. And that became to the point where it just became suffering. It became suffocating, really. It became too much.
Yeah, so as you were speaking, then you talked about this internal pressure that you had created, and you mentioned there was a turning point for you where you wanted something different from your career. And I guess that's something that I'm really interested to understand, how working in an industry that really focused on appearance and, as you said, had some really clear ideas of what was right. How did that help you want to focus your career on what's inside? And you did speak of a turning point. What was that turning point?
Yeah, I love that question, because I really do believe that because of the work I did in the modeling industry and the focus being so on the external appearance, that it made me actually so curious about what is on the inside. So Yeah, I think for me it was around, look, the industry is obviously based on external appearance and looks and so on. That's what the whole industry is about. But I do believe, and I do really think, and this might be overlooked by a lot of people as well, is that it is as much about external appearance and looks as well as about internal mindset. Like you have to be quite resilient, is what I found, to be able to be adaptable, to be in changing environments constantly, to be on your own most of the time, and to be performing at a high level and to show up again and again. I think what just started to happen for me at some point is that I didn't fully see why I was doing it. I didn't see the bigger picture of it. It didn't align with my values anymore at some point, where I didn't see how it was me doing this work for me wasn't really improving humanity, for example. It wasn't really contributing on the planet or anything natural in it. If anything, what I started to really see is that um, depending on the type of brand and of course the type of marketing that's been done around it and so on, but if anything, it sends a message to women that they are not enough, that something about them is not enough, and you either buy this product or this thing and it's going to make you feel better, or you're going to now feel more like a model probably, which is what the whole picture is selling, right? And so that's what I just really started to see. And what I guess the interesting thing about it is that the models themselves are constantly being told that they're not enough on some level. And so both the people within the industry as well as the people that are not directly in the industry but are sort of the consumers of it, they're getting these messages that it's not enough, that there's something that needs to be improved, something needs to change, buy this thing or do this thing and you feel more whole or more complete on some level. And I just started to, I think, see through that. I started to see through that story, both in myself and sort of in the larger systems at play. And I started to look at the people around me and I was like, I don't know if anyone is like really genuinely happy here. Like, yeah, sure, they're enjoying themselves on some level, and that's true. And I do really believe that some people really just really enjoy that. Um, but genuine fulfillment and happiness, I didn't see that. But the main turning point, I believe, came through when I had an eating disorder for about 6 months. So it lasted relatively short. And I just really suffered. Like I just really suffered on the inside. And that's where I think the main turning point came for me. Like, I'm not happy. This industry is not making me happy. And I started to inquire in myself. I was like, what is it in my mind, or what is it in my mind, body, being? What is it in me that is so negative? When did it become so negative? Because like I said before, it was a very gradual process, and all of a sudden I experienced the suffering. That's how I experienced it, at least. And so through that inquiry and through really asking myself also, who am I? Who am I beyond this role? Who am I beyond this external image that I've created? Who am I really beyond this? So I had a bit of an ego death, or a big one. And in that I just broke down. I broke down to the point where I was like, I don't know who I am, and I actually don't know what I stand for and what is important for me, um until I did, of course. But that was the real turning point, and that was around the age of 21, sort of I was actually at the peak of my career, but the eating disorder was also at its strongest. um and I just broke down, and the breaking down for me was the breaking through. Absolutely, I needed that. I needed to really fall apart in order to come really back into what is really, really important for me. And that's when I started to really go inward and inquire inward.
Yeah, like almost like a dark night of the soul.
Yes.
It's um it's so interesting to hear you talk about this and to really think back to like my teenage self, which I think a lot of women would resonate with. looking from the outside into an industry like the modeling industry, and the comparison for myself feeling less than, and looking at the modeling industry and the women in the modeling industry and really thinking, well, these women are more than. And it's so interesting to hear you say that right in the middle of the industry, at your most successful point, there it left you feeling less than.
Yeah, that's how I felt internally, right? And that might not be true for other women in the industry, right? I do really want to nuance that. That might not be true for them. Like, I think there are women in the industry, models in the industry, very successful models in the industry that have a very positive overall experience and also look of themselves. It's just that's just the way it flipped for me.
Mm.
And I think there was actually an interesting flip because on the one hand, I did feel very powerful and I did feel very um sort of vibrant in my role, and I did feel that in the industry, but at the same time um there was a deeper value system that was starting to come through, and I think that's what started to clash. When I was on the catwalk, I felt great. It was just when I was not on it, I almost felt, yeah, worthless, of like, what's the point for me, like, of being here a little bit. It sounds a bit existential, but that's really what it was.
Mm.
And so I didn't see the value outside of me on the catwalk anymore because there was so much value placed on me on the catwalk or me in front of the camera that I lost sight of what is actually my value as a woman outside of my performance or outside of my success. And this is where how I got lost in the success or the validation rather in the industry. And I placed all my value into that. And then what happens is value becomes very conditional. It becomes very much based on, if I get the job, I'll feel good about myself, or if I do this thing, I'll feel good about myself. What's the next achievement? What's the next higher step? And I just saw it was a dead end at some point, because when do I actually then feel good about myself on the inside without any external validation? And so that became the inquiry for me. That became the real process for me of like coming back to my innate worth and my innate value beyond any recognition, beyond any magazine publishments, but without any of that stuff, and how I just really feel valuable as a woman without external success, so to speak. And it's not to not have the success, but to find the value in a deeper part of me, which I know exists, and it exists for all of us. I just momentarily lost sight of that in the
Mm.
midst of that industry. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that even at that really young age, you had enough awareness to have that inquiry in the first place as well. You still work in the modeling industry though, but from the outside, it sort of feels like your career trajectory is somewhat of a reclaiming. What is something that you've reclaimed about yourself?
I think shaving my head 2 years ago was a really big part of that. Um, yeah, shaving my head 2 years ago. So I shaved my head 2 years ago. Just for reference, I have very long blonde hair before that. And my hair was very much part of my product because my hair is quite thick and I did a lot of shampoo campaigns and things like that. So shaving my head was a very yeah, it was a bit of a fuck you, really. A bit of a rebellious, probably my inner teenager coming out and needing to have a moment. But I felt I reclaimed something in myself there. I felt I reclaimed my personal power. Like, I actually decide how I look and how I want to look and what is beautiful for me. And now what I find is I'm still enjoying jobs in the modeling industry. I take on jobs that really align for me as well. So that comes with certain brands and certain organizations or brands that are aligned with my value system. And I get to do it in a way where I'm looking after my body in the way that I feel good about. And I look in the way I wear my hair in the way that I want. And so it feels like I'm doing it more from an authentic place because I'm not adjusting myself so much to what I know the industry wants. And interestingly enough, I do feel people appreciate that. So that's something I found so far, is that people do really appreciate that. And I'm coming into a new phase of life. There's potentially family and things like this, and it's just there's a whole change happening within me around that. And to answer your question, the main difference is that I feel I'm still in the industry, but on my terms.
Yeah, beautiful.
Sara, what began to shift the relationship with your body?
Good question. I feel the real deeper shift for me became really apparent after I did breathwork. And that was my first experience was in Breathwork Bali, with Breathwork Bali, with FBR Breathwork. So this technique, facilitated breathwork patterning, that I'm not trained in, of course, but that when I first walked into the shala and I laid down on the mat and I did this session called FBR Breathwork, and we were in a beautiful bamboo shala in Bali, and that in of itself was just gorgeous. It was such a beautiful connection in the space, and the practitioners that were there were holding the space so well. And then Edward Dangerfield, who's the founder of Breathwork Bali, he guided the group into a breathwork journey. And I laid down on the mat, and within 20 minutes or so, I just started to really feel all of the details and all of the cells in my body started to come alive. And I felt a change. I just felt a real big change on the inside of my body. I had the most profound breathwork experience during that session. And after that session, we set up in we set up and we connected back in circle. So after everyone goes through a breathwork journey, we share in circle how that was for us. And so I set up and I shared, and I was like, that was profound, and I want to train in this. And it was just super crystal clear that this was my next part of my path. I had done previously to 2.5 years ago or so, when I walked into the shala in Bali, I had done breathwork before. So I'd done rebirthing breathwork and other forms of conscious connected breathing. And of course, I was already trained as a meta NLP practitioner and integral semantic facilitator and so on. So I was familiar with how to use my mind as a way of a tool of coming back to oneself and inquiring and coming really deeper into self through asking good questions, through different NLP techniques. All of these processes I was familiar with. For me, breathwork, and particularly FBR breathwork, really just shifted that into a deeper layer of self-inquiry because it connected me so deeply to my body. And I think that was the first time where I started to see, whoa, I'm actually not in my body at all. Like, actually. So obviously throughout the modeling industry and throughout my whole life, I've been very active. I've always played sports. I've done lots of yoga. I've done lots of different activities with my body, right? So I felt like I was really embodied, so to speak. I felt I was really in my body. Obviously the modeling industry had a big contributing factor to me looking more at my body as opposed to me being more in my body, because it was so trained to look on the outside inwards as opposed to how am I actually feeling on the inside. But then also I believe most people actually that are quite active and fit and so on are not actually embodied. I think the real difference and shift for me started to come through breathwork, where I started to really understand this term embodiment as well. And really, embodiment to me now is this real deep intimacy and connection with all the different parts of myself, including the different expressions of my body, and allowing the body to run its natural course and trusting the instincts. So really coming back to intuition as well. And I can now say that because I feel so deeply at home in my body. And if I look at the contrast between now and 2 years ago, it's just been life-changing. It's been massive. And so that's what began the real shift into my body. And that's began the real shift into what I would now call embodiment and a true relationship with the body.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you speak to that. We can be looking at the body, but not in. And I think we can all relate to that. And I really do love how you spoke to breath work as almost like a coming home. And that's why we're here, right? A remembering and a coming home and deepening, that relationship with the body. Um, I wanted to explore, and you went into it just a little bit just now, but how did FBR breath work really become a part of that reconnection? So you've laid down on the mat, you've had a beautiful, profound journey. And then how did that ripple through your life from there?
Hmm. Yeah, I love that question. Yeah. I think that the real deeper truth started to emerge for me after that first session, but then also as a continuation as I started doing more breathwork sessions around this simple thing, the breath. We breathe all the time. How this simple system in the body, which is both voluntary and involuntary, and by simply becoming aware of my breath and changing it in a different rhythm, in a different pace, because with facilitated breath repatterning, we use conscious connected breathing. So what that means is that we take away the pauses at the top and the bottom of the breath, and the breath just starts to move as sort of a singular loop, as a connected loop. And how this process then puts someone into an altered state. So the person goes into an altered state, and through that altered state, with facilitated breath repatterning, we then receive body work and touch work that specifically supports certain tensions in the body or certain parts of the body to open up more fully or to release more fully, depending on what's being witnessed in the body and in the breath mechanics. And I think it was because of this touch work and this body work that was so supportive for me in my breathwork journeys that it really helped me to feel certain body parts that I was just not connected to. Like I just wasn't feeling it. Right. So, but by having someone else place their hands on my belly, for example. So my breath pattern about 2.5 years ago was pretty much only chest breathing and no belly breathing at all. And that I believe was because I worked in the professional modeling industry. And so there was high demand, high pressure, and so on. And that just allowed me to be in this sort of constant fight and flight mode, actually. And I wasn't even aware of it anymore because it was just so normal. And so when then someone placed, I remember very clearly, one of the facilitators placed their hand on my belly and it was just like, whoa, what's that? I didn't even know that existed, like that I could breathe into that body part. And it sounds simple, but it was profound for me. And then I started to breathe into that body part more. And so I started to reclaim all of these different breathing rhythms, all of these different ways of breathing, all of these different places in which I then could breathe. And with the body work and the touch work, it helped me to also then reclaim the emotions that were related to those spaces. So the emotions and the thought patterns, and therefore also the behavioral patterns. And in that way, I think that's where I really found the real reconnection, so to speak. So the reconnection to myself through the support of the facilitators, because they could guide me into a place, into my body that I could not reach myself. I actually needed someone else to point me in the right direction, so to speak, to bring awareness to different body parts that I could not feel myself. And I think that is the profound difference also with this technique, because it really supports people into coming into touch with the places that they've lost touch with.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think we're all connected by this FBR facilitated breath repatterning, which I think we'll spend some time talking about further in further episodes. So much of your life now is in service to others, particularly facilitating breath work for others. What does your own breathwork practice look like now?
Yeah, so I breathe myself at least once a week. So I guide myself through a session at least once a week. And then sometimes once a month, we come together as a team here in Barron. So we breathe together with all of the people that have gone through the FBR training so far with us. And we breathe together as a team, which is super fun. So I have that. And then every morning, and really, really just micro moments during the day, I'm just aware of my breath. So I take a conscious, deeper breath with a long sigh out, for example, and it just helps me to take a moment and to reconnect. And it is actually so simple, and because of its simplicity, it's so profound. And I believe in keeping it simple. I believe in really keeping it simple as that, because really what the connection to the breath has opened up to me is that it is actually so simple. And I think in a lot of wellness industries today and health industries, it becomes almost overcomplicated, and it becomes this other thing that is to be achieved maybe somehow, or this other thing to accomplish. And so in my practice with both myself and then with the people that I work with, I like to really keep it simple and come back to the simplicity of simply become aware of your breath in the moment or in micro moments during the day, and notice how this is related to maybe to certain thought patterns or behavioral patterns, and just take a deeper breath and see what happens. And I think I look at it through the lens of this radical curiosity. So curiosity for me, and Lara, Lara Z, who is one of the women that has come through the training as well, she speaks to this so beautifully as well, is that curiosity is one of the highest forms of self-love. And I actually really agree with that. And that is, to me, at the essence of facilitated breathwork patterning, is a deep and profound loving curiosity towards ourselves, and using breath as the vehicle to access different parts of ourselves to bring that love and that curiosity too. And I think if you approach anything with curiosity, it will be met and it will be integrated. And I'm talking about, for example, different emotions or different feelings, could be rage or anger or shame or fear or grief. If we really meet those different expressions through curiosity, they will soften, or they will integrate, or they will let go, whatever is required. And that's really how I look at my own practice as well, and my own breath, and now my own body. So I've really moved from a lot of perfectionism and judgment and comparison and over rigidity in my body to this deep curiosity and loving awareness of my breath and my body. And that for me is a really, really big shift.
Yeah, I love a couple of things that you said there. Firstly, I love this idea of curiosity. You just brought me back to my childhood when I was told I asked too many questions. And now I love listening to my daughter asking questions and being curious. I think it's such a beautiful state to live in. So I love that you shared to that. And I also really love how you described making it easy, because I think that we are somewhat, and maybe just because we're in the industry, but we're in somewhat of a place where breath work has become the latest health fad, and everyone has to do it this way or that way. And I think having just that simplicity of just noticing your breath and letting that be the starting point is really beautiful, and taking the pressure off having to do anything anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've talked about FBR being such the catalyst for you really understanding this idea of embodiment. What else has FBR opened up in your life?
Oh gosh, I think it's changed everything. And I don't say that lightly. So I'm just a firm believer, because I've seen it in my own life and I see it in other people's life, is that doing the work inside. Yeah, and it can be through breath work, but it can obviously also happen through other modalities, right? But for me, it's been breath work. Doing the change and doing the work inside is gonna directly reflect in your external environment. That's what I've noticed. So because I've changed my breathing rhythms, which is directly linked to changing my emotional state directly linked to changing my mental state and therefore changing certain behaviors and choices that I make, it has made a radical change in my life in terms of not only how I look at the world, but also actually how I act in the world. And so it can really change the trajectory of someone's life. And that's what it's done for me as well. And that's what I feel is really particularly profound about this technique, because I find I've done a lot of different healing modalities, right? I've explored so many different things. I'm very well practiced in yoga. My mom is a yoga teacher, so I got that from a very young age. I did several plant medicine journeys in psychedelics. I've done years and years and years of inquiry of personal coaching and development and leadership coaching and semantic coaching and sitting in circle. And for me, breathwork was just the key that unlocked so much within me. And again, facilitated breathwork patterning. And I also really appreciate how Edward Dangerfield, my teacher, how he speaks to it, because I believe the way he's transmitted the teachings to at least me has really changed my view on the body, on the on healing itself, on spirit, on life itself. And it's really this quality of simplicity. Again, it's this radical curiosity and simplicity. Just get really curious about yourself and things will unfold.
Mm.
And I feel that is also now at the essence of my work, is if you just simply are being with yourself, like you sit with yourself, you take a moment with yourself, or you breathe in your body, like in it just by the act of doing that, things will unfold and things will change and things will become clear. And I think it's this shift in even because even the wellness industry now has been somewhat masculine, like made masculine, and there's nothing wrong with the masculine, but it's just not true about, in my opinion, what real returning to the body really means. And that's what I love about facilitated breathwork patterning, because it actually feels like a more feminine approach. It feels like it's more about listening, it's more about curiosity, it's more about intuition. And in that sits a lot of power and a lot of strength. And so it's not to shy away from that at all, but the essence for me is feminine. The essence for me is around really listening and becoming soft again with ourselves.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So much of the breathwork industry does feel like efforting, having to breathe, over breathe to have these psychedelic experiences, or jump in an ice bath while you're breathing. Whereas this, yeah, there is a really beautiful softness to it.
Yeah, I feel facilitated breathwork pattern really honors nature and really honors our human nature. And really, for me, it's reconnected me to that in my own self. And that's why I teach this technique, and that's why I believe in it, because it is so natural.
Yeah, I love that.
I've heard you, Sarah, speak to FBR about being a gateway for you in terms of finding stillness and rest as well. And what does being at rest in your body feel like now that you've found that?
Now, I love that question, because I feel now rest is simply me being in my body and being aware of what's going on. And sometimes that might mean I'm actually angry, right? But instead of shying away from that, I'm just in touch with it, and I can rest into the anger, or I can rest into the grief, or into the expansion or the love or the joy. So instead of this sort of pushing quality, I'm more leaning back in life. And what I've noticed actually is by the leaning back and by the more almost more receptive way of living, my capacity has increased, funnily enough. And 2.5 years ago, someone would have told me, you're gonna breathe in this way and it's gonna increase your capacity. Would be like, yeah, whatever, right? I wouldn't have believed that. And I was pretty like a bit of a type A, you know, like I'd like to achieve and to get shit done. And like, I just love that. And I still love that. But now I get to do that from a very restful place. So I'm actually more productive. My capacity has increased in life. So I get more done with less effort. And that for me is a very big celebration, because I do really love achieving things in the world. I enjoy that part of myself, and I really enjoy that part of humanity as well. I love creating things. I love putting projects out there. And I love that I can now actually do that from a place of rest. And I believe that that has really come through, particularly over the last 6 months or so. I've really worked with shame and with my own belief systems around not enoughness. And I've really come into, like I was already speaking to before, how I place my value sort of in the external. So I placed my value into how well I was performing in the modeling industry, or what other people, if they chose me, yes or no. So I placed my value in the external. And my real work in the last 6 months has really come to, how can I really rest in myself and place my value back into myself? And what I've noticed is, by doing that, I just feel complete in myself, and all the rest flows from that. All the rest just, is a beautiful part of life and a beautiful part of creation. And that gives me a lot of ease. Yeah.
I love that you bring in almost like a resting in the achieving or the doing. I think it's something that you can speak to so well. Sara and I are both high achievers, and we'll get properly into things like the Enneagram in later episodes. But for all you need to know now is that Sara and I share this same drive for success, and to watch Sara be able to rest in the face of that, and how you've done that, Sara, through breath work and being able to drop, I suppose, almost that older version of success and external validation, and stop chasing that.
Yeah, I believe in the me having stopped chasing that. I've come into a restful place in myself. And what I am noticing now in life is that things are coming my way naturally. And so, again, I think it comes back to this quality that I've reclaimed in myself, which is more the feminine aspect of myself, which also for me means receiving. I think before I believed I only deserved something, whether it was like a good outcome or a certain achievement. I would deserve. This was a very old belief system, right? I wasn't aware of this on a conscious level until it became apparent through this practice. But I believed on some level that I only deserve something if I work hard for it. Hard work, like what does that even mean, right? And that was a belief system I carried. And I've really managed to change that belief system in myself. And who knows what layers might still be there, right? But at this point in time, I feel very healthily complete in myself around how I've managed to change that into, actually, I don't need to work hard at all. Yes, I show up, right? I'm here and I show up, but I can also receive the goodness of life, and actually receiving is easy. And I just really changed that belief system in myself. And what I'm now noticing is that instead of almost me reaching out for opportunities are coming my way. It's like the whole cycle has reversed or something. And I actually think my breath cycle has reversed, right? Or not reversed completely, but has changed in such a way that, because I'm now taking a deeper inhale and a more full and relaxed long exhale, my exhale has really, really increased. I believe life responds to that with allowing then the inhale to become very vibrant again, and for things and opportunities in life to flow my way more easily. So I believe it is in the reclaiming of this belief system. Life doesn't have to be hard. Work doesn't have to be hard. I don't need to work hard in order to achieve things. I can just also lean back a little bit more and allow things to come my way. that's where I really see a big shift in also my external environment, particularly in the work context or in the professional context. Yeah.
I think what I really love about that, which I see in you, I've seen in Mel as well, is when you stop striving and pushing and forcing and just start allowing, things move towards you anyway. I think in our society that really does value all of those things, pushing, striving to the point of exhaustion. It's such a lesson for us to trust and allow. So I love that effortlessness that you've created here as well. And I think as part of that, something that I really admire about you is the clarity you have around your needs. And it's something that I've learned from you and am trying to bring into my own practices as well. But I'm interested, what boundaries have you set that have really changed your life?
Oh, that's a really big question. What boundaries have I set that's really changed my life? If it's not aligned with my value system and with my heart's desire, I'm not doing it. That comes to certain job opportunities, that comes to relationships, that has to do with, I mean, even as simple as what I eat or how I exercise. Like if it's not aligned with my values, I'm just not doing it. I'm not convinced by someone else, even if they have a very good page on why the thing is really a really good idea. And I'll hear it out, I'll listen. But if it's a no in my body, it's just a no. And I do think the breath has really also contributed to that, because it made me more in touch with, so like I said before, I wasn't really breathing into my belly. I wasn't breathing into my pelvis pretty much at all. And pelvis is really what I now know from, the work and the technique and so on, is really also where we say a lot of yeses and nos in life, where we say, what are we saying yes and what are we saying no to? And I think because I'm now breathing and I'm so connected to my pelvis, it's just become naturally really clear what works for me and what doesn't, and what is a yes and what is a no. Um, and I believe that is rippling into my life again. Like I said before, that the way we breathe is the way we think, and the way we think is the way we behave. And yeah, being just really clear on my yeses and nos, and I think particularly as a woman as well, that's very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like the way you've described it, it's got to the point now where it's almost an unconscious, very intrinsic understanding of what's a yes or a no. Or is there still part of you that sits with those decisions?
I think a big part of it for me has become, yeah, like you said, like quite sort of natural. It's just a natural way of operating in the world. So I'm not thinking a lot about, oh, shall I say yes or no to this? With certain aspects for sure in life, particularly with bigger life decisions, I'm definitely taking a moment to contemplate sometimes. Um, and tune into my body and tune into my breath, and really ask it, what is it really aligned for me. But yeah, the majority of my decisions come quite naturally, I feel. Yeah, like if I was to put a percentage on it, I feel 80 to 90%. It just feels very natural and easy. And it feels also, I'm also more connected to my heart. So I think that is a really big aspect of it as well. I think the heart space is where we actually make a lot of choices in life. Is it aligned with our heart? Is it aligned? Yeah. And by me being more connected to my heart and my heart's choices, like what is really deeply meaningful for me. And sometimes I ask myself this question: what would love do, or what would love do in this moment? And that can sometimes help me to move from, instead of what would fear do, what would love do? And it can be this really simple question that just helps me to tune into that a little bit deeper if I do struggle with that. But yeah, the majority of the time it feels very natural for me at this stage to know what I'm committing to and what not. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What would love do? So beautiful. And it sounds like you are at this point in your life now where you invite in and celebrate all parts of you. Are there any parts of you that you would previously apologize for that you've stopped apologizing for?
Absolutely. I think the parts of me that need rest, for sure. So just the parts of me that needs to rest now and then, I've stopped apologizing for. I think also the parts of me that sometimes feel insecure or not competent, I'm more willing and able to admit that in the moment and to speak to that and ask for help. I think there was a really big part of me that didn't want to ask for help because I am a strong, independent woman and I can do it myself, was kind of a little bit what I was carrying in that. So probably the biggest part of me that just is just more human, has become more relational. I've become so much better at asking for help when I need to, at taking a moment to rest when I need to. Um, and again, I really believe that that comes through me having worked so much with my shame as well. And I think shame we'll get into in one of the episodes because it's just such a fascinating emotion or core belief system, if you will, has to do with so much of our humanity, I think, has been driven by shame and the certain choices we either make or not make.
Mm.
And so, yeah, just really speaking super openly about fears, about things that I might sometimes feel ashamed of or scared of, things I might feel guilty about. And just, I think for me, authenticity has been a way home as well. And authenticity to me means a radical honesty about myself and what I need, and being just really open and honest to other people about my internal world, with, of course, healthy boundaries and containment as well. I think another piece that I'm not apologizing for anymore, and this might sound maybe a bit weird to some of you, but for a very long time I thought I didn't want to be a mother, and I didn't want to have children because on some level I considered that to be not independent enough, or I couldn't be independent enough anymore. So because I feel like I've reclaimed more of my dependence, my healthy dependence on other people. We're all dependent upon one another, whether we like it or not. That's just the way we are as humans. And I guess I denied that for a long time. Is one thing I've stopped apologizing for is that I really want children and I really want a family. And that feels very, very meaningful for me. And um, that's something I'm very happy about that I've rediscovered in myself.
Yeah, that's such a special awakening. I love that so much.
I do too. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So, I guess with all this in mind, your journey, your relationship with the breath, similar, the things that you stopped apologizing for, or the parts of you that you've learnt to love again, how do you help other women find that peace? Find those parts of themselves through circle, story, the breath?
I think what happens is when we embody different parts in ourselves, or when we reclaim different parts in ourselves as humans and as practitioners and as space holders. So I hold people in space in retreats, in circles, in smaller groups, in bigger groups, in one-on-one settings. Yeah, through breath work, but also through inquiry and coaching work. And I think what happens when we as space holders, or I as a space holder, embody these different parts of myself, there is a certain resonance that starts to happen in the room with whomever I'm in, that people feel naturally safe. Women feel safe. I think that's what happens. They feel safe because they can see I'm not just sitting there and mocking about, or I'm not just saying something. Like I've walked through the fire. I've had experiences in life. I had this massive ego death that we spoke about before, and in that I've really come face to face with myself, and I needed to look at these different parts of myself. And I believe as much of the education I've done, all of the courses, all of the extra upskilling and schooling and certifications and all of the things I've done, which are very important. Like, you need to have the tools as a practitioner in order to guide people, of course, ask the right questions in the right moment and so on. I believe it's because of my own embodiment in my own self. There's a certain resonance that happens, and women feel that. And in that, the space gets created for their parts to be revealed, for their parts to be shared. And that's what I believe is really the foundation of all of this work, really. And definitely something I stand for in my own personal practice. I come back to my personal practice because I know that that is the foundation of where I serve from. It's the seed, it's the core that everything else comes from.
Yeah, you spoke to that so beautifully. And I can honestly say, being one of those women that you have held, I know today we sit here in circle as equal, but I have been one of those women that you have held through circle, through breath, and some other things. And I think I can really say that that's exactly what it feels like to be in your presence. So yeah, I just wanted to honor that and thank you for that, Sara.
The first time I met you, Sara, was in Byron, and we were doing that activity where we walked around and we looked at each other in the eyes. And I actually, it's such a weird thing, but I don't think I'll ever forget that, because I felt like no one's ever looked at me in the way that they see me, the way I felt seen with you in that moment. And I think I told you, or I alluded to that at that point. But to reiterate what Mel said, I think this is so innate in you. It really feels like, yeah, you've got all the skills, you've done all the courses, but so have many, many people, right? It really feels like this is your calling. And it was just so beautiful. I hadn't heard all your story of modeling. It really was just such an eye-opener for me to hear your story. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for sharing that back. That actually makes me feel very, very warm and fuzzy, and it brings tears to my eyes a little bit to hear that as well. Because yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because what I'm hearing in that as well is that in the you recognizing of me seeing you, you are also seeing me. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, amazing.
So that's all from us today. Thank you so much for tuning in to We Are Woman. I hope today's conversation gave you something to reflect on, to feel into, or to carry with you into the rest of your week. Please make sure to click subscribe on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss the latest episodes as they drop. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a woman that would find it helpful, because this isn't just our podcast, it's all of ours, together. You can also follow us on Instagram at We Are Woman Podcast to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join our growing sisterhood. We've got some very special events planned and would love for you to be a part of them. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being exactly who you are.